Time now for our PIX panel. Joining me this week, PIX and Politico reporter Ayana and the New York editor for Politico, Julia Marsh. Great to have you both here in your blues. Let's begin with the questions over the air quality report, okay? Because this was a big story last week, a lot of criticism from the city council. But the leaders of the administration, they're standing firm on their very response, right? The mayor even getting flippant during a recent interview saying, what do you want me to do, go put out the fires myself? So what do you make of all of this, Ayana? Let me begin with you first.
Well, I will say, Dan, it's tough to tell whether or not there is widespread outrage from New Yorkers or whether or not the politicians are looking for a political fight on this issue. But the Adams administration really stood their ground, saying that they relied on information that was provided to them from meteorologists from the state, and that information wasn't accurate. But we certainly heard a lot of pushback, especially from public advocate Jumaane Williams. His office, in fact, put out a report saying the city simply didn't do enough to warn New Yorkers to get them key supplies like masks in advance. So it's tough to tell whether or not this is another reason for the city council to fight with the mayor. But we did certainly hear some concern from residents, especially last month when our skies turned orange.
Yeah, I mean, it almost, and the mayor, once again, you know, really going combatively at the city council, Julia. And even last week was an issue about something else. I think it was congestion related. But Lincoln Wrestler's name came up, and he kind of made a face about it. So what is the mayor's relationship with the city council?
It's tough. It's tough right now, and you know, they were able to reach a budget deal on time. We were unsure if that was going to happen, but now they're fighting over housing vouchers. They had this oversight hearing yesterday, and it's quite combative.
Yeah, combative to say the least. You know, and let's talk about the other big story, which is crime and the perception of crime, right? No doubt New Yorkers are feeling uneasy about the very issue, the threat of violence in the city. This recent poll from Siena College looked at crime concerns statewide. So let me throw some numbers up for both of you. More than half fear they could be a victim of a crime. 51% fear for their family's safety in public places, and more than a third have felt threatened overall. But the latest crime stats show that crime is decreasing in the city, right? So you got to give credit where credit's due. There was a 4% drop in overall crime in June. Shootings are down close to 25% this year. So if the numbers are going down and the fear is going up, the mayor then pivots to the media, saying, well, it's the media's fault because they're the ones who cover the crime. Ayana, once again, what do we make of this?
Well, I will say, Dan, that in recent weeks we've had some very high-profile violent incidents. For example, the shooting at the park in the Bronx where 2 children were shot. So that's one isolated incident. But because it feels so egregious and so large for New Yorkers, I think that part of what we're seeing is folks see an incident like that and they feel that that may be a reflection of overall crime trends when it's not necessarily the case. But this is something that we've really seen throughout the Adams administration, a disconnect between the crime numbers and the crime perception.
But it's not only that, it's not just a perception thing, because some New Yorkers are saying, well, I see with my very own eyes just small things happening on the street that lead to their perception of not feeling safe, right? So how do you change the perception, Julia? It's a tall task.
I mean, this has been the mayor's essential message from when he was on the campaign, that the perception is the reality. I think the problem is that he spent so long talking about crime, and now finally the numbers are going down, and he's really got to get out there and trumpet the increases in safety just as much as he highlighted the dangers of crime. And, you know, he has focused on quality of life issues, so I think we would expect to see even more of that from the administration.
Yeah, it's such an interesting conversation here because it's such a tricky, everyone's livelihood is at stake here when you talk about these very issues, right? And I know it could be hard for the mayor to hear day in and day out when you look at the papers and you watch the news, but we're just covering the facts of what's happening in the city. And that brings me to this new report from Rikers, right? Reports coming out this week about unsanitary conditions at the jail, the federal monitor saying that the Adams administration should be held in contempt because of it. So the question once again has now come back up to the surface, Ayana, of a federal takeover, and is it inevitable?
I don't know if it's inevitable, Dan. I will say this. I did visit Rikers just before the pandemic with the public advocate, and I recently spoke with him after he returned to the jail. And he said it's a mixed picture. In some ways, there are some improvements, but there are certainly some real challenges, especially when it comes to violence. One thing that this latest Federal Monitor report made clear is that action turnaround plan that the city submitted a year ago, they're certainly not living up to it. But it seems like there's certainly some hesitancy in terms of taking the step of a federal takeover. I mean, with so many deaths, it's hard to know what would it take for a federal takeover to finally happen.
Yeah. All right, we're going to leave it there. But Ayana and Julia, I do appreciate you both coming on. As always, good to see you, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
We'll be right back, everybody.